I interviewed over 1,200 people in what was, in some respects, a casting call to try to identify what I knew would need to be three protagonists through whom to tell the story. It's the three protagonists that represent the 6 million. And it's a way for the reader to go along on the journey of these people as they have to make this really tough decision, the decision of their lives, really. And then to go with them. They're inside, the reader goes inside the train with them and is riding alongside them in the car as they're crossing the desert and the mountains to get to California. And I wanted to be able to make that period of time come alive for the reader. And I wanted the reader to imagine themselves in that circumstance, in the circumstance of being in a caste system that's beyond your control and then breaking free of it. And I wanted people to think to themselves, what would I have done? What would I have done if I'd been in that situation? What decision would I have made? Would I have stayed or would I have gone? And I wanted the reader to be right beside them, almost in their head and in their hearts as they had to make that decision. The story is told through three amazing people whom I had narrowed down from the 1,200. Each one takes on a different journey. One of them goes up the East Coast, which is the East Coast migration. The other goes up the Midwest, the midsection of the United States. And then the third person to leave was a man named Robert Joseph Pershing Foster, who had been a surgeon in the Army, but it turned out that he could not practice surgery in his own hometown of Monroe, Louisiana. And so he set out on a perilous journey from Louisiana to California, which required that he had to drive through the desert and the mountains without being able to stop, because during that time period, in 1953, it was not possible for African Americans to stop because of laws that prevented them from being able to stay in hotels and eat at restaurants. And so he had to drive for 3 states. And that was a trip that I sought to recreate myself by renting a Buick as he had and taking that journey. I've been so influenced by the stories of this great migration and the stories of the people in this book. I have learned so much more from them than I could ever feel I could give to anyone else. I truly believe that they have given us, and also the forebears of all Americans who had to make some great migration experience in order to get here and for us to be here today. I think that they've left us a code of conduct and a way of being that is ultimately one of fortitude, forbearance, never ever giving up no matter what the circumstances. I mean, at the time that these people made this migration, there was no email, there was no Skype, there were no cell phones. I mean, and yet they still did what they did. And I just get so inspired by the stories of the people in this book and the stories of the ancestors of all of us for what they did and what they went through, that I think the lesson of all of this is to never give up and to jump off that cliff if that's what it's calling for in order to achieve your dreams. It's been really heartwarming to be able to go all over the country, north, south, east, and west. But the book tour actually began in the South. The first places that I spoke actually were in Atlanta, Georgia, and at Ole Miss, the University of Mississippi. And these were the departure points for this great migration, so it has a great meaning and symbolism to me and to those people who are part of this migration. And the response has been overwhelming. I've been to every single southern state where there have been often overflow crowds, standing ovation, because in some ways it's a chance for healing and acceptance and understanding of something that happened that deeply affected the country north and south. But this is where the people had come from. And I've been honored to be able to speak to a lot of people in the South. There's also the return migration of people who had been in the North, the children of people who are part of this great migration. And they come out in large numbers to these events and have embraced the book, because in some ways it's their story times 2. They are children who were part of the Great Migration, and they have made a migration themselves. And so it's this beautiful circular experience that occurs when the idea of migration is discussed with people who've been part of it themselves. Some of the most moving moments going out and talking about the book come when people who were actually part of the migration, people who made the migration themselves, they've been brought by their children or grandchildren, and they want to, in some ways, testify, in other ways, thank the effort that had gone into the book, because it's validated their experiences and what they'd gone through. It also has given them the freedom in some ways to talk about something that they'd not had a chance to do so before. It's also given people a chance, people who are children of this migration, to have a portal through which to discuss sometimes painful parts of their own family's history, or often triumphant and inspiring parts of their own family history. And so those moments where people who, whatever their background, I mean, I've had people who have come from Poland or from Ireland or from Romania, and they will come up, or from China, and they will feel a direct connection because they themselves went through what the people in this book did. And I find those to be some of the most inspiring ones. The idea of migration is basic and human and universal. Most Americans and most people on this planet are products of people who migrated from far away, from the countryside into the cities, from one region to another to make their lives better. And so the people in this book in some ways are proxies for what someone in all of our backgrounds, wherever we might happen to be, had to have experienced in order for us to be here. They had to make the sacrifice to leave their homeland, their ancestral homeland, the only place that they'd ever known, and set out for places far away so that they might find and make a life better for themselves and for their children. And in some ways, we all, in some ways, owe a debt to the sacrifices that someone like the people in this book had to have made in order for us to be here. I would have to say that one of the experiences that stays with me, perhaps more than any other, is the one where I was speaking at a library on Long Island, and it was a cold, wintry evening, rainy, and it was packed. And at the end of the talk that I gave about the book, there was a signing line, and the signing line was very long and went along the periphery of the room. And at the front of the line was a woman who was a grandmotherly figure, and she had her arms were filled with copies of the book. And she had tears welling in her eyes as she stood there. And she told me, "I can't talk about the book. I can't begin to talk about the book. If I start to talk about the book, I will cry for sure, because the book is my story. This is my story. You see, I'm an immigrant from Greece, and this is my story." And when she told me that, I was just so overcome, because the book has won so many awards, and I'm so grateful for that. It was on a lot of best of the year lists, and I feel so fulfilled as a writer to have experienced that. But hearing that from her meant that the book had transcended boundaries that I had always hoped it would. And it was living proof that the book is truly, and the story truly, and the people, the protagonists in this story, truly are telling a universal story, a universal human story that touches us all.